Alright, good day. Today I would like to teach you some stuff about EnRoute, give you some pointers to get you started. First thing, if you look at my cursor here moving around, and down here you'll see the coordinates. So I have my X and my Y, and you see as I move the cursor those change. So basically every point on here has a number value, and that's how the machine works. The CNC machine basically just the cutter goes to every point value that you tell it to go to. So, basically we're just applying that principles that you've learned in your math classes over the years, the coordinates. So your X and your Y and your Z, we're just putting them to work finally. So it's pretty neat. When I was in college, we used to actually have to type in all the coordinates, but this fancy software here helps do this for you. So one simple program, for example, one of my students once did a sign that said Remington, and that program had pages and pages of code, number values to tell the machine where to go. So basically, that's all we're doing. There's lots of different ways to set this up. If I go up to Setup here and I go to Preferences, I can go over here to Grid, and starting off with the grid isn't a bad way to go. You might eventually want to work off of a grid, wean yourself off of it, but it's not a bad way to get started. So there's two types of grid, a major grid and a minor grid. So if you click in this box, those grids will show up. Usually your major grid's going to be larger in size than your minor grid. So when I do all my typing on EnRoute, I use the side keypad. I hit my numbers lock and I do all my typing on the side. It's a little bit quicker. So I set my number grid at, everything in EnRoute will be in inches, so decimal inches. So I just set it at ½ inch, 0.5, and then I did my minor grid at 0.25. So now I came over here and I decided to change my color. I did a blue and a red grid just so you can kind of separate them. So this is just a preference thing. You don't have to use a grid at all, obviously. So now watch when I hit OK. You'll see the grid. So I can zoom in and out. If your mouse has a little roller on it, like this one does, that works really good for zooming. Some of those get a little dirty or dusty. Some students like to bring in their own mouse. You just plug it in, and it's kind of nice to have that. So basically that's the best way to zoom, really. You can also go over here to View, and there's also lots of zoom functions over here to help you zoom all. That's the one I use the most. And then zoom in or out or the different things. So, one thing that I've had students do for years that I've kind of leaned away from, but if you go to Preferences and I go View Setup, you can turn on or off the plate. So here's the plate. It's this red box, and that represents the cutting area. So some of the assignments ask you to make a plate, and that's just to help you contain the cutting area. So if I click on this button, it will let you change where the plate is. So one thing that's really important is that the X and the Y are at the zeros. You can type in your width and the height of the plate, and then you hit OK, and that's how you can change the plate up a little bit. I think I'm going to turn the plate back off just for this. I think it'll be a little bit nicer. So I'm just going to uncheck that box, and then I hit OK. So basically, the next step is to just start drawing some lines. So I'm just going to go draw a line, and I can click on this and see how it's jumping right to my dots. That's really a handy feature, and that's just a snap setting. So over here I have some snap settings, and those are like just helping hands to help me, figure out what exactly I'm trying to do. So that kind of helps out. One thing that I like to do is just type in my measurements. So I come up here and I click on this box, and this helps me input specifications of what I'm trying to do. So if I go draw a line, and I'm going to let the snap jump here, and then I'm just going to type in the length of my line. So let's say I do a 5-inch line. I tab down. That helps me get to the next box. And then I think I'll make my angle at 0. And then I hit tab to OK, and so there it did. It just drew a 5-inch line at an angle of 0. So now maybe I want to go up 1 inch at an angle of 90. So 90 is going to be straight up, and there we go. So now I'm going to go back over 5 inches. Maybe I'll just do 5 inches at 180. Okay, so that went back over that way. And now I'm going to go down. So I'll just go 1 inch down at an angle of 270. So remember, you have 360 degrees, and that's all you're doing is you're just working around your angles. So if I start right here, and I do a 45 or a 2-inch line at an angle of 45 degrees, it's going to look something like that. So you just have to remember, you start from your center point, you have a 360-degree circle. That's how you figure out those. Now when I go one line over, see how I just click and then I can break that line back off with the right button. So your left and your right mouse buttons, they kind of do a certain thing. So that you'll learn kind of how that works. But when you're trying to exit out of a command, you just hit your right mouse button and that just breaks you out of that command. All right, so those were just kind of drawing some lines, and maybe I'd like to draw a rectangle. So if I come over here to rectangle, notice this whole settings, there's lots of settings that just opened. So I can draw a rectangle by putting in the measurements. So I'm going to do a 4x4 rectangle. Well, now it's really a square, right? But I could place it where I want to place it. Or perhaps I just want to drag and sketch a rectangle. So I can do that too. And that's another way to do it. Now if I click on this again, I'm going to open up my box over here. If I click on this, you'll notice if I go move, in the X value, it is negative numbers. So whenever we actually send this to the machine, we can't have any negative numbers. So I need to make sure I move my shape to a positive value number. So I'm just going to set this at 0 here. And I'm going to tab over. And I'm going to move that rectangle to a 0 value. So I can move from the center of the shape or the, whatever corner I want. But ultimately, when we go to make something on the machine, we're going to have to zero it out. So the X and the Y and the Z should all be 0 from where we're moving something. So that's kind of handy. I mean, you can grab shapes and stretch them and change them. It's still on the grid, so it's snapping on the grid. But you have to kind of be careful because some of them, if you're trying to be really specific, stretching them and changing the shape isn't the best idea. As we go through the assignments, you're going to find a lot more, assignments to help you out. If I don't have my snap keys here, let's say I go setup, let's see, this is under toolbars. And if I uncheck my snaps, see how they're gone now, and then I go back here to toolbars, snaps, and then it opens them back up. So if you're missing something, you might just have to make sure it's set up right to kind of help you out a little bit. So lots of commands to learn. As you start going through this, you'll start to figure them out a lot. If I go to circle here, there's a couple ways you can draw a circle, but this is by radius. So remember, radius is half a diameter. So if I want a 1-inch circle, I'm actually going to have to, change that to a radius of a 1/2 inch. So now it's, if I measure across, it's 1 inch. So that kind of helps me out a little bit. All right. Another way to draw a circle is by hitting this button here, and that stretches it. Okay, it stretches it out. I'm not accurately measuring anything, but it's a way that you can work on a circle. So we went over the plate a little bit. I showed you how to do the grid. I showed you how to do a couple lines, a rectangle and a circle. And on the next video, I'll show you a couple more things. Remember, you can always go back. If you mess something up, you can go back to undo it. Not a bad way to do that. There's a built-in calculator that you can use that will just kind of help you out with some of your, your images. I will have you do a couple screenshots. So if you click on this, this will help you take a picture of what you are working on. So you're going to want to change this to probably a JPEG image, and then you type in a name for this, and it will save your screen as wherever you left off. It's not very accurate. It's not a file you can do much with, but it is kind of helpful.